Everybody's ready? You're okay? Good. Oh. Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a special public budget meeting, February 24th, 2020. It is 5 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by a posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled, the same as provided by law, of a schedule including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call.
Deputy Mayor Knudsen.
Here.
Councilman Seaton.
Here.
Councilman Voigt.
Here.
Councilwoman Walsh.
Here.
And Mayor Hache is absent.
Please stand for the flag salute. Please join us for a moment of silence for our men and women serving our nation and our first responders. Thank you. And with that, we'll go to public comments, not to exceed 3 minutes per person for 40 minutes in total. Any public comments? Okay, very good.
Okay, so we'll start with our discussion items. The first departmental budget to be reviewed and capital budgets to be reviewed this evening is the tax assessor. We have Tony Rinaldi, who's here. He's our new assessor as of, well, officially January 1st, but he was here in December. And so we welcome you. And basically, we're just going to have you give your highlights from 2019, goals for 20, and then the council will ask some questions.
Okay. Well, in reviewing the 2019 budget, the wages were basically to state the numbers what are in it, everything. Heather? Just state the numbers here as far as 2019 budget goes.
You don't have to go through line by line. Just give the highlights of 2019 and then your goals for 20. If you don't know too many highlights from 19, then just go for the goals for 20.
Yeah, I mean, basically the highlights from 2019 is Mike Barker retired, and I took over his place. This year, our budget has declined due to the fact that myself and my assistant are both new here, so our payroll budget has been lowered. And as far as our other expenses go, for such items as printing and binding, office supplies, most of that is pretty much running in line with what it was for the last year in regards to our education and items like that. We have a budget set aside for some reserves for tax appeals. That depends upon what we have as far as the tax appeals that are so far processed. We have about 15 total for this year, which seems fair for us. So until April 1st, we won't know our full turnaround, but as of now, we're looking pretty decent.
Great. Questions?
Yeah, I just have a couple of quick questions. So the 15 that we have, are they left over from last year? Were they filed last year, or they were filed in
These are
2020?
filed for this year. There are a few that are continuations of either last year or the year prior to. Basically, those are more of commercial.
Okay.
There's a few commercials within there. The residentials are pretty much being negotiated right now.
Okay.
It's more on the part of the attorneys themselves that we're trying to negotiate with. Sometimes within the tax appeal process, the attorneys will try to hold out a little longer. Not from our side, that's from the other side.
Okay.
So we try to negotiate where we reduce either the freestanding years, like 2017 or 18, if they've been in for a couple of years, we try to have those removed, and then we will just negotiate for going forward so that we're more involved with credits than refunds.
Okay. And then, so any of the stipulations that you do, are you keeping like a running tally for our budget purposes?
Yes, we keep a running tally of all stipulations. The stipulations are basically until they're signed into a judgment. Okay. We don't include those because sometimes stipulations will be although we may agree to them, sometimes the homeowner may not. So
Okay.
until we do receive a judgment, we do not fully consider those finalized.
Okay, all right, that's all I had.
Jeff?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, Mike?
No questions. Thank you.
I think the highlight was the declining salaries. So- The highlight for you.
That's fine.
So,
As he said, they're both new, so
Yes.
over time.
So actually, I was appreciative of Councilman Walsh asking that, because that was exactly what I was wondering with the leftover appeals and where that came from. So it's good information to have.
Yeah, for the most part, the appeals they're being resolved now.
Right.
But there's nothing too outstanding in that.
Right. But we'll really have a better idea come April 1st. Did you say?
Correct.
Yeah, because that's
Most
when
of that is
everything
county
has
level,
to-
though. It won't be state level, which is
Yeah, got it.
easier to negotiate.
Okay, good. I'm good.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is municipal court, and we have Kim McWilliams, who is our municipal court administrator, is here. As you recall, we have a shared services with Glen Rock and Wyckoff courts, and so she's our shared services municipal court administrator, and she's been here since August, is that right?
Yes.
Since August of last year. So again, you've been here a little bit in 2019, so you can discuss the highlights and then just any goals for 2020.
The highlights would be Maria Dore retiring, and then we entered the shared service agreement, which is for myself and our deputy, Lisa Silkowski. The salaries are a bit lower because we're both new and because of the shared services agreement, how it's written. The shared services, I feel, was an accomplishment because most likely the state will be mandating shared services for all courts in New Jersey, so we'll be ahead of that directive. The other accomplishment, I feel, also was the continued implementation of bail reform, which has also become known as criminal justice reform. And keeps evolving, more and more things are changing, and it's just how it is in the state right now. The downside to that is that the court revenue has decreased because of bail reform, which I believe Maria made everyone aware of that last year, that it was coming. Our operating expenses have stayed the same, and they should stay flat for next year. So that's a good side to it. And that's about all, really.
Yeah, for the most part, all expenses are flat, so there's no real difference there.
So from a capital perspective, you don't have anything in your files because there was nothing submitted. Just had a conversation with Jay Chuck. The metal detector out there is on its last legs. It's about a $7,000 for a new one. It's 17 years old. It is something we'll have to address, so keep that in mind when we do the capital budget summary. There'll be another about $10,000 for all the add-ons that go with it. So that'll be in the final budget.
Okay. Questions, anyone? Mike?
Thank you.
So, thank you.
So, okay, I think we're going to jump to the police department because the police department is here. Well, is he? He's not here. Yeah. Oh, he's putting out fires?
Thanks, Jim.
So we have Chief Lucky, Captain Lyons, Captain Amaruso, and Sergeant Chuck.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I guess since Heather's walking away, you should start with what highlights and achievements and goals and objectives. Highlights and achievements from 2019, goals and objectives for 2020. So this year, we were able to purchase the start of... Jackie, I'm sorry, could you just move that microphone up? Good, thank you. And make sure it's on, tap it.
Is it on?
Yeah,
there it
tap
goes.
good.
Okay. So this past year, we were able to start the purchase of our heavy-duty vehicle barricades. We were actually able to use them for downtown for the holidays. We do only have enough for really one intersection at this point in time, which is why you see it back into our capital budget requests this year. We have also been continuing with the growth of the security and camera system, which again, the big stage 3 will be happening this year as well. We were able to add one officer onto our traffic unit. One of the biggest types of complaints we get is dealing with speeding or some sort of traffic issues. This has allowed us to give some targeted enforcement of some of those trouble spots and better address some concerns. In addition, we have started the renovation of our conference room, which also duplicates as the EOC, in order to make it more conducive for both of our needs, and having some of the backup radio systems into it. But again, we need a little bit more to finish that project, which is why you see it back into the budget this year. Moving on a little bit to some of our income-producing ideas, we are finally up and running with Carfax. This gives residents and non-residents the ability to access their motor vehicle crash reports from the comfort of their own home or own office. We think this adds also to the ability of, we get a lot of the big bulk requests. Those can go through there as well. And right in both our ordinance and some of the OPRA regulations, picking up those reports in any manner other than in person allows us to charge $5. So Carfax will be passing that $5 cost right on to us. The other benefit of Carfax is the investigative back-end tools that when we're looking for specific vehicles, specific license plates, we can do some searches right on the Carfax site. They look like you have a question.
No, I had a thing about Carfax, and so you continue, because I just something that popped in my mind, an experience, and I just, go ahead, you continue, and then I'll
Okay.
ask.
We also are finally in the final stages of dealing with our electronic ticketing platform. That will be coming before you all shortly so that we can move forward and sign some agreements which will allow the company to start marketing it in the state of New Jersey. We will be the host agency for it, which again will be allowing for some income as the company gets to grow.
Any questions?
Well, and then some of the major increases in our lines. I know in our other professional services, some of this, every year we have to tweak things a little bit and make sure things are going into the right categories. So a couple of these categories really is just moving to the proper accounting of items. This is also just the increased cost of some of the pre and post exams. The other contractual services is mostly due to the anticipated increase of our school crossing guard, that's 029. 030, 044, that's dues and books and publications. Again, getting things into the right categories and ensuring that we are members of the various organizations that we should be. 096 is accreditation. This is our heavy-hitting accreditation year. We have our 4th off-site. We have our on-site, which means 2 individuals are coming in to do their inspection for 4 days. And then we go out to answer any questions that CALIA may have and receive our award at a conference. Ideally, I would like 3 of us to be going out there this year so that it's myself, the accreditation manager, and I will say the detective captain or one of the 2 captains, so that they can see what the process is while we're out there, because they haven't been through that process yet. And whenever there may be questions, I don't think it's fair to have anyone other than the chief answering for those at the time. Regarding some personnel requests, the The manager, CFO, and I are still in discussions regarding how to best balance the workload between patrol and administrative positions. I am asking to hire an officer, as I do have one slated for retirement this year, and I would like to start to have people up and ready to go once the multi-unit housing complexes are being rented out and up and fully running. And I think the final question was regarding our vehicles. So we have 3 different vehicles that we would like to be replacing this year. Car 13, which is a 2014 Ford Explorer with 50,000 miles on it. Engine hours, the equivalent for the engine hours, it's really about 410,000 miles on it due to the engine hours. Car 19 is a 2015 Ford Explorer with 35,000 miles on it. But again, the engine hours are 9,004, which is about 270,000 miles. And car 28, which is a 2015 Ford Explorer, the mileage is just about 30,000, but the engine hours are 8,466, which really equates to about 253,000 miles.
Right, and right now in the capital budget, you have 2 of those 3 in the budget because, just because of the other needs throughout the capital budget for the other departments.
We have those cars in here?
We have 2 of the 3 that they're requesting.
Oh, well, I'm looking under purchase of vehicles.
2 new Tahoes.
I'm sorry?
2 new Tahoes, it says.
In our capital budget.
Capital budget?
Oh, capital.
Because,
Capital
yes,
budget
because
for
ours are
police.
Tahoes,
Yeah.
they go into the capital budget, not
Okay.
the operating budget.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. I have a couple questions. Uncompensated time of $260,000. Help me understand that.
So some of that would be dealing with the individual that is retiring. Some of that is also dealing with paying people down to the contractual 40, 80 hours. It's not something that traditionally has been done in the police department for quite a few years, but it is something that is beneficial not only to the department, but realistically to the town, that the sooner you can pay that down, the lower the income is that individuals are earning, so that it stops being held, they make it, and then 10 years later they get paid for it.
Okay. And then other contractual services, 29?
That's the anticipated increase with the crossing guard services contract.
Yeah, it's up like 10%. Why is that so high? It's like from 350 to 400. It's like up 10%. What's the deal with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
The main reason is, since our last contract, there has been state labor laws that changed, like compensation for sick time, and which isn't in our contract now. So that's going to have to be something negotiated mid-year here.
Yep.
So we talked to Bob, and that's kind of our expectation of where that might be, plus any other general increases.
So they're a union, the crossing guards? I didn't know that.
No, but they are subject to our state laws.
Okay.
And we've had changes in the last 6 months requiring that they be able to accrue for sick pay.
Yep.
Which we didn't have in our last contract with them.
Okay.
So our efforts to outsource this,
We're still ahead of the game.
right, well, actually, that's what I'm going to ask, is
Okay.
whether or not we've done any analysis to determine whether or not we're still ahead of the game, because I appreciate that. I know we had so many issues, and this was really a good direction to have taken this in, but I'd like to have a better understanding of where we're at with being ahead of the game.
Except that it was never a money saver. It was more a time saver for the police department, so that they weren't thrown onto crossing guard duty instead of doing patrol, instead of doing enforcement around the schools. So even when we sent it to the League of Municipalities and we won that award, we said it wasn't necessarily a money saver, but what it did is it saved the time spent by officers who would normally be on the road and couldn't be on the road because of absences or different reasons that people weren't showing up.
But
So-
even though it's not a money saver, the first year we showed a substantial decrease in overtime because
Yes,
we didn't have to put
correct.
the police officers on duty for this.
No, and I'm not saying otherwise, and I certainly wouldn't want to have to give the award back, Heather, but I would just say that, right, as long as we have that understanding that we're still ahead of the game, because I remember those days, and I remember all the overtime, and I recall that there were even times when we could not dispatch a police officer to the location, and so we left children vulnerable at those crosswalks. So, and not through no fault of our own, it was just a numbers thing. So I just want to make sure we're still.
One more point, and Jay, you know this better than I do. There have been very few times where we've had to provide police officers to back up someone that didn't make it. I mean, it's just a handful, right?
Yeah, exactly. We actually we had a management change at the beginning of the school year, and those first 2 or 3 months, we noticed a significant increase in our coverage. We met with management there, and they immediately corrected that, and I don't think we've covered post in like 70 work days.
Okay.
So that's been pretty good since the beginning of the school year, noticing the change, addressing it, and being right back on top of it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, could you help me just walk me through a little bit of some of the things you've done to reduce overtime? Because I remember it was getting kind of out of control a few years ago, and it's come down significantly. So I know the crossing guards was one aspect of it, but I think there are several other things that are working into bringing down some of the overtime.
Well, when our overtime was at the highest was before we hired 6 individuals that year. If you remember, we had 6 people that all retired at the end of one year, and it took time to get people up and running. So that was that year that we were really high. Since that point in time, we've been able to reel that in, and a lot of that is that sick time and just staffing holes that we used to have to cover. We do move people around. When we know we're going to have somebody out for a longer period of time, we actually try to cover those in advance, which also helps decrease the overtime.
And has the scheduling software helped out with that too?
The scheduling software makes it significantly easier to see when those impacts are going to hit ahead of time so that we can make those adjustments. It also helps with the sheer time of the administrative end of it. It used to be 6 different people doing various different parts of it, and now it's really been consolidated into the one, and it's made life a whole lot easier.
And you see that kind of continuing? You don't see any spikes in overtime or anything like that going forward? You have staffing levels where pretty much you need them and other tools available?
So the other thing that we were, knock on wood, very fortunate with last year, surprisingly enough, we did not have one major storm. So that tends to be another big hit for us for overtime that, again, Mother Nature we have no control over. You recall those October storms where we had power outages that I had to have. We had mandatory work days of people coming in because I had to saturate the areas that had no light, no power, no nothing, but we still had residents living in there.
Okay, thank you.
So I just have a couple of quick questions. The new developments downtown. So a few weeks ago, I had proposed to my council colleagues an occupancy ordinance. So how do you calculate how many extra police officers we're going to need for the proposed volume of individuals that are going to be living in those complexes?
So some of that is taking into consideration what our call volume is at the other high occupancy locations. Some of that is throwing back what some of the FBI statistics, and we're not where we should be on FBI statistics right now, but again, doing that same equation. Where are we now? How many people it's going to be adding, and then how many officers will that require us having?
So just as an exercise, if they're all going to be completed at the end of this year, beginning of next year, and you have to back in the academy and hiring new, so like when do we have to be up and running so that we're not behind? Because of the time lag, we can't say, oh, now it's done. And so I'm trying to understand so that we have better information for the ordinance, what the lag is in terms of how we're going to get people actually boots on the ground.
So part of my answer is we're already behind because it takes 9 months from academy time, field training time, for an officer just to be riding on their own. That said, I don't expect them to be fully occupied in January of next year. So as long as we start the hiring process with, July of this year and start things moving forward, ideally, I would love to get people into the January Academy class, but I know that due to our budgeting process that's simply not a feasible thing. So I'm always looking at the July class. I also know it's difficult to be putting in, 4 people at the same time, because that's very administratively intensive when we're going through that field training process. So 1 or 2 people in the next couple of classes will keep us, I think, where we need to be.
Okay, so July 2022, right? And then assuming...
Well, we had one.
Right, we have 1 slated for the July 2020 class. And
So then we are behind. So see, that's the concern, because it's going to take a year, essentially.
It takes a
to
year for
catch
an
up,
officer to be up and running.
to catch up.
But I think as long as we get at least the 1 into this class, and then we continue that, with the one that we got mid-year that's already up and running, our other new one is just coming out of his field training cycle. So with adding the 2 that we got this year is at least a help in the process.
So what would be because we have a possible retirement, so then at the end of the year, what would be the number of officers?
I'd still be at 46,
You'd still be
with
at
hiring
46.
1 and 1 retiring.
So you'd still be at 46. And, I mean, if there's any data that you can share with us in terms of how that's calculated, officers to population percentages.
I will work some
appreciate
numbers and
that.
get it to you.
And then I guess the only other thing
I think we're below that anyway, though. Realistically.
We are.
And
We're
we always
very
have
below
been.
that.
We always have been.
But
The
that's-
population to officers. So
Yes.
if you want to go that route, that's fine, but
Well, at least to
I'm
have the
just saying,
data.
we've always been below it. Always.
Yeah, but at least for us to have the data, because all of these other pieces kind of roll into the same collection of information.
It's just one more data point, I think,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
what Bernadette's saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
don't
And I
disagree.
look at that, if I show what those numbers would be where we are right now, and then kind of the same percentages of increases.
Yeah, because I think that would be helpful, across the board. And then the only other question I had was pedestrian safety. So what are the programs that we have for the residents for pedestrian safety? Because I think, I explained the other night that I was driving down Maple, and, if I had been looking in the other direction, if something had caught my eye here, I would not have even seen the person walking in black that literally walked into the road. Literally walked in. If it had been a second where I looked this way and didn't catch them in this corner of my eye. So is there anything that's proposed for pedestrian safety for residents of the village?
So it is something that is addressed in the various programs and presentations. I did 2 different ones this year, more towards the end of the year. One was actually for the English as a second language
Okay.
group over at the library. One was with the Ridgewood Japanese Association, trying to get to some of those organizations, and that's a little bit of an FAQ about the police department,
Yeah.
but sitting on the safety issue and trying to encourage both the driver and the pedestrian,
Right.
that adage of stop, look, and wave, that you have to make sure you maintain that eye contact and getting that information out as much as we can, because as you know, it is very difficult. How many times we've said, lock your cars,
Yeah.
don't leave your stuff in it,
Yeah.
but yet it continues to be that as a problem. We can only get that message out about education. It's a matter of it being absorbed by our residents.
Well, I mean, Sergeant Chuck's always he's every month here at the CSAC meeting, which is very helpful. I mean, we're going to be working on the North Monroe, West Glen intersection, which is a safety issue. We're going to have sidewalks up West Glen, safety issue. So, I mean, we are doing some good stuff. I think it's helping people go to school and back again, and so, yeah, I mean, are you talking about education?
Well, I mean, and this is going to sound interesting, we don't have to worry as much about the kids because they're the ones that are getting it drilled into, it's the adults that just, they're on their cell phone and they just walk into the street, and most people slam their brakes on. I mean, you just have to sit anywhere in town and watch the behavior. They're talking, no one is stopping. They're just walking into the street and assuming the driver is going to stop. So I don't know how you other than tapping them on the shoulder when they get to the other side and say, do you realize, or maybe we should,
Well, just as another example is that the bike issue. I guess about a year ago, somebody got hit by a bike, a young kid, and hurt his head really badly. I mean, the school's starting to work on that now. They're educating on proper bike safety. So yeah.
And we go visit the schools
Yeah.
to help enforce that conversation with the kids, encourage them.
Yeah.
Looking at the bikes, having that discussion about walking. We do have an officer in the middle of downtown, but again, he may be walking down the sidewalk and you see somebody that's not paying the least bit of attention and looking at their phones. And there needs to be more of those advertisements about people walking into the walls, which really does happen, or walking into the signposts because people are not paying attention to their surroundings.
Thank you, that's all I had.
I hear all of this and I just think more and more the devices and the distractions and the signage and the sheer volume of vehicles, pedestrians, that it's just a combination, like a recipe for trouble. And I just wonder if it's not something that we shouldn't be focusing more like on little PSA, like little videos and things, or even on our e-notice, if we have little blurbs on the e-notice that say, just remember, you're responsible for your own safety, so pay attention. I mean, because it's just as much a pedestrian's obligation to be responsible for their safety as it is the vehicle. I just think it's such a overly complicated issue right now because there's just so many distractions, so many. I mean, even in the cars, it's like everybody has their GPS, they have their phone, they have the text, they have the calls. It's just crazy.
I've noticed some new signage in some surrounding towns, which I'm going to take a ride with the chief and show it to her because I think it would be beneficial. It's just kind of a reminder as you're driving, and it's good because it's like it's like on an existing signpost, but they put it down low. So as you're driving, it catches your eye and you see it. And so one says, heads up, phones down. Another one says, we stop for pedestrians and crosswalks, and they're at very busy intersections. So it's just a, kind of a reminder as you're driving, like, oh yeah, I should be looking up.
Well,
So, and again, I think anything we can do to help the situation will be beneficial.
I got to tell you, that flashing speed sign on North Walnut, I mean, the residents love that. They do. They stop me every time I'm driving down that road and make sure I'm going, well, I do go 25 because of that. But they'll, yeah, I see. I see. Well, no.
It simply makes you more aware of the speed that you're going.
Yeah, and it
as opposed
tells you,
to,
yeah,
again,
I think it's great.
When you're glancing down to check your speed, it means you're taking your eye off the road unless you
Yeah.
have one of those new cars that have the
Yeah.
heads-up display.
It was well worth the investment, by the way.
So I
Are
just
you
wanted
making
to,
fun of my driving?
I just wanted to go back to the discussion about the additional one police officer anticipated for the July up at the academy. And I just wonder if there's room for two, if we wind up with somebody out and somebody retiring, if we wind up with any issue whatsoever.
It's net
We're-
zero.
Right, and we're at a net zero, and I have to listen to Councilman Seaton and recall when we were horrified at the overtime budget and thinking, how are we going to fix this? And that delay on the hiring of the 6 police officers really cost the taxpayers a really big chunk of change, and it was a serious amount of money. And I certainly would never want to be back there where this is even creeping up a little bit. I'm hoping we can actually reduce it further. So I think it's just something that needs to be maybe a little bit more scrutinized. I would not, for one, want to be back where that number starts to go back up.
Well, I'm always willing to look at adding another individual.
I know
And
you
it's
are.
just one that, as I throw it across your bow, it's not just about a salary line. It is then adding more to the uniforms, another radio, there's a lot of other equipment costs, but trust me, I would much rather be ahead of the game.
Right, I mean, because when we were not ahead of the game, when we were behind the 8 ball, we were in trouble.
It costs
We were
a lot.
in a serious place.
We were.
With the money, and so I just would hate to see us back there, and, you know, like Councilman Walsh just said, we'd be net zero if we had one issue.
Yeah.
One issue come up, and we wouldn't want to see that. Anything else?
I just want you to go through your recommended capital budget, because that's what we've done with all of the other departments. So you see your initial request at 2020, but you go down the recommended, those are the ones we agreed to. So if you could just go through them quickly so that the council knows what you're requesting.
Right, vehicles, we already had a brief discussion about. The body armor replacement is our standard. Weapons replacement, our less than lethal equipment. Sorry, as I was like looking at the wrong column there. Our battery backups, that is dealing with the various radio sites because we're having constant problems with communication. So it's adding the batteries to the radios. The EOC project upgrade, that's the remaining so we can finish that project. Traffic safety supplies are things like the additional signs, the conage, chairs. And I know that's kind of one that looks a little bit silly, but we are all still in the chairs from post-Hurricane Floyd. And some of them are single-use chairs, but even after 24 years of sitting in the same chair, that padding is starting to really go. So this is to help us start the process of replacing the chairs. Vehicle barricades, I spoke about, that's to add a few more. Our Cisco upgrade, this is our old records management system that it's only on one computer now because, of course, it doesn't work with all the new Windows 10 upgrades. The server is starting to die, and we have records in there that we have to keep for 75-plus years.
75 years?
Yes. And some are 99 years.
Really?
Depending on what the records are, yes.
Wow.
That's why we have files back to the 1950s that we have to pull up through the scans that we have. Portable radios, again, a continuation of the replacement program. And just like everything else, the price of those has gone up like the price of cell phones has gone up. The security access control, again, that's the village-wide project that we keep tabs on, and replacing the air conditioner at the police desk. Again, it's there from 2006 when we moved in. The condition of it is not great, and it really does run 24/7 because even in the wintertime, you know, the guys are dressed for the outside weather or the inside weather, and then they're really, really hot by the time they're sitting at the desk. And that would be our capital budget.
Any questions on it? Anyone?
You have base station replacement on the next one page.
That's Northwest Bergen Central Dispatch, actually.
Right.
So that's our contribution
Oh, okay.
towards
Sorry.
that for
Right.
them.
Got it.
I have one more question. So, lots and lots of residents are getting the Ring or similar device on their front door. Do we have a way to connect that information to the police department?
We do. We actually are one of the Ring neighborhood, I think is what it's called.
So the police department's on Ring neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay.
So that we can see what people are posting. We can actually make requests of people if they're in a certain area when we're looking for it. So it helps so that we don't necessarily have to go door to door to see who may have what kind of camera system.
So, I have a Ring, but do we have to register with the police department? Is there anything, so just, we're on
You do not.
neighborhood, so you would see
Correct.
anything
If it's something that you're willing to post,
Okay.
we are able to see it. We don't get access to it unless you're posting it.
So if somebody rifles through your car, you know, or whatever, and you post, somebody went through my car last night, or whatever, and then somebody else says, somebody went through my car too, you guys are seeing where,
You'd have to tell us about it. What it would be is, so you tell us somebody rifled through your car. We're going to ask anybody in this neighborhood that may have captured it, please
Okay.
check your rings from this
Okay.
time to this time
see if anybody's
and let
walking
us
down the
know.
street or whatever was happening.
Yes. So it just makes it a little bit easier to gather that information.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
do you know where the rings are? Like, in other words,
Yes.
okay. So
But again,
because-
we can see that because we had to go through that process of submitting an application to Ring.
So in other words, you know what, like Bernadette's address, a ring is assigned to her home.
Yes,
Got
but
it.
we don't see it unless she posts a
Understood.
video.
Okay.
That's a good thing.
Really?
The things come on my porch.
Like what?
That information is also on the website. It
Yes.
shows that we're a member of the Ring neighborhood.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
Like what?
All right. Any other questions?
Really?
All right, we're good?
We've got it all here.
And your front door? What do you have there? Ah, oh, okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Have a good night.
Thank
Okay.
you very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks, you too.
So we'll go back to fire department.
Do we have that or no? Fire department. Where is it?